A powerful and emotionally distant millionaire fired 15 nannies in just 27 days, unable to control his son after a family tragedy. When all seemed lost, the 16th candidate emerged, a pregnant nanny, rejected by agencies, wealthy families, and society itself. Against all logic, she does something none of the others dared to do and touches the child's wounded heart and the father's. What begins as desperation transforms into a miracle capable of softening the heart of a man who never believed in love. The sound of the crystal vase exploding against the wall echoed through the mansion's hallway like a gunshot. William Blackwood closed his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to find some shred of patience in his already exhausted chest. It was the 15th time in 27 days that he had heard that kind of noise, invariably followed by the hysterical sobs of a nanny running down the stairs with a suitcase in her hands. Through the half-open office door, William watched the scene repeat itself once more. Carol, the 15th nanny, descended the marble steps with swollen eyes, her uniform stained with orange juice, and what appeared to be blue gouache paint in her impeccably styled blonde hair from just 36 hours before. The 53-year-old woman, with 3 decades of experience in high-profile families and references that included a member of parliament and 2 entrepreneurs from the Forbes list, could barely hold her own handbag as she stumbled towards the door. William didn't move to stop her. What difference would it make? The other 14 had also left in the same way, each with her own horror story to tell about little Leo. The first one lasted a week, the second just 3 days. From the 7th onwards, none managed to complete a full week. Carol had set a new negative record with her meager 36 hours. The wall clock struck 10 in the morning on a sunny Tuesday in London. Outside, the city bustled with its millions of inhabitants, each absorbed in their own lives and problems. But inside that Kensington mansion, amidst the perfectly manicured gardens and works of art worth more than most British homes, William Blackwood felt completely lost. He was 35 years old and the owner of one of the largest construction firms in the country. Blackwood Holdings had its name on skyscrapers that pierced the skyline of every major British capital. William closed deals worth hundreds of millions of pounds before breakfast, negotiated with politicians and international investors with the same ease other men ordered a pizza, and had built an empire that employed over 15,000 people. But a 3.5-year-old boy had completely defeated him, Leo, his only son. The child who used to be so quiet and obedient that sometimes William forgot there was a child in the house. Everything changed 6 months ago when Catherine didn't come home after that charity meeting. The phone call from the police, the hospital, the doctors with their grave expressions and carefully chosen words. William had dealt with it all mechanically, signing papers, making arrangements, fulfilling the expected rituals of a widower. But he hadn't shed a single tear. It wasn't out of calculated coldness or a lack of heart. He simply couldn't. The marriage to Catherine had been arranged by their families, a convenient union between 2 business dynasties. They were cordial, polite to each other, and played their social roles perfectly. But love? That had never existed between them. Leo, however, loved his mother with all the intensity a small child is capable of feeling. And when she disappeared from his life overnight, something inside the boy broke in a way William didn't know how to fix. The first few weeks were confusing. Leo cried constantly, asked for his mother, and didn't understand why she wasn't coming back. William, not knowing how to explain the unexplainable to such a small child, mumbled some vague words about Mummy having gone on a trip. It was a terrible mistake. Leo began to wait. Every day he would run to the window when he heard the sound of a car, hoping to see his mother getting out with her designer handbag and elegant smile. But she never arrived. And with each passing day, the boy's frustration and confusion grew. Then came the destructive phase. William still remembered the day he came home from the office to find Leo's room completely destroyed. Torn books, broken toys, clothes scattered everywhere. The nanny at the time, a plump and friendly lady named Martha, was sitting in the hallway with an ice pack on her head where a toy truck had hit her. She quit before William could even say a word. The subsequent nannies didn't last much longer. Leo would bite, kick, throw things, and scream until he turned purple. He refused food, refused baths, refused to sleep. It was as if a tiny demon had possessed his son's body, turning the sweet boy into a destructive hurricane. William tried everything. He hired the best nannies in London, those with impressive resumes and astronomical salaries. He hired a renowned child psychologist who charged £1,000 per session. He bought every toy Leo glanced at in shop windows, filling the room with expensive gifts in the hope that materialism could replace the emotional void. Nothing worked. If anything, the boy's behavior only worsened. The phone on his desk rang, interrupting his dark thoughts. William answered without checking the caller ID, knowing exactly who it would be. His mother's voice exploded through the receiver before he could even say hello. Eleanor Blackwood wasn't one for formalities. "William, I just received a call from Carol. She's going home in tears, saying she'll never come back, not even if you pay her double. What happened this time?" William ran a hand over his face, feeling the stubble scratch his palm. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. "Leo threw paint at her, and orange juice. I think there was also something involving the Ming vase from the living room." "The Ming vase? William, that was an 18th century antique." "Was," William confirmed, his voice flat and emotionless. "Now it's a pile of blue shards on the Persian rug." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, one that William knew well. It was the silence that preceded one of Eleanor's famous outbursts. "This cannot continue," she snapped. "That boy is out of control. You need to be firmer with him, William, more discipline, rules, consequences. When you were a child, I never allowed this kind of behavior." William bit his tongue, resisting the urge to say that when he was a child, his mother spent most of her time at European spas and charity meetings, leaving him in the care of an endless succession of housekeepers. But it wasn't worth starting that argument again. "Mother, Leo is 3. He lost his mother 6 months ago. He's not misbehaving for fun. He's grieving." "So what? Tragedy happens to everyone, William. Life goes on. He needs to learn to deal with it like any civilized person." William closed his eyes again, mentally counting to 10. Eleanor had never been particularly warm or maternal, but since Catherine's loss, she had become even more distant and critical of Leo. It was as if she blamed the boy for not being able to overcome his grief in the manner expected by London's high society. "I'll hire another nanny," William said, keeping his voice neutral. "The agency said they have more candidates." "You've fired 15 nannies in less than a month, William. This is becoming a scandal. People are starting to talk. Just yesterday at my club, Patricia Drummond asked me if it was true that your son is uncontrollable. Can you imagine the humiliation?" "I'm sorry for your humiliation, Mother," William said, unable to completely hide the sarcasm. "But I have more pressing matters at the moment. Like, for instance, finding someone who can take care of Leo without running out in tears." "What you need is a wife," Eleanor declared, changing the subject with the subtlety of a bulldozer. "A stable female presence in the house. Someone suitable, of course. I have a few friends with very well-bred single daughters. Marcia Drummond has a daughter who got her MBA at Harvard and—" "No, Mother. William, be reasonable. You can't spend the rest of your life alone. Leo needs a mother figure. Leo needs a competent nanny, not a stepmother you picked out at a charity dinner." "You're being stubborn and irrational," Eleanor retorted, her voice rising an octave. "But fine. Hire as many nannies as you want. When you get tired of this circus, we'll talk again about suitable people to join the family." She hung up without saying goodbye, as she always did when she didn't get what she wanted. William placed the phone back on its cradle and stood up, walking to the office window that overlooked the garden. Down below he could see Leo sitting alone on the swing, motionless, staring into space. The boy wasn't playing, wasn't running, wasn't doing anything, just sitting there with his messy brown hair and paint-stained t-shirt. Something tightened in William's chest, an uncomfortable feeling he didn't know how to name. Guilt, perhaps, or failure, or just the crushing weight of not knowing how to help his own son. The office door opened, and Sarah, his personal secretary, entered with a hesitant expression. "Mr. Blackwood, the nanny agency called. They said—" She paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Said what, Sarah?" "They said They're having trouble finding more candidates. Apparently, word has spread among professionals in the field about the situation here. Of course. The nannies talked to each other, shared warnings about problematic households. William couldn't blame them. Who in their right mind would apply for a job where 15 people had been fired in less than a month? Do they have anyone or not? William asked, his patience already at its limit. They have one candidate, Sarah admitted, wringing her hands. But the agency manager said she doesn't exactly fit the profile you requested. She doesn't have the usual qualifications. And there's a particular situation. What kind of situation? She's pregnant. 6 months. William let out a humorless laugh. A pregnant nanny to care for a child who had already made 15 perfectly healthy women give up. It was almost comical. Does she have experience? Sarah consulted her notes. She's worked in 3 homes over the last 5 years, but she has no written references from any of them. The last one fired her 2 months ago. Why? The agency didn't have details. They just said it was a matter of incompatibility. William should have dismissed the candidate immediately. A pregnant nanny without proper references, fired from her last job. It was exactly the kind of risky hire his mother would use as ammunition for years. But he was desperate, and if 6 months of chaos had taught him anything, it was that impressive credentials on paper meant absolutely nothing in practice. Schedule the interview, he said finally. Tomorrow morning. Sarah seemed surprised, but simply nodded and left the office. William turned his attention back to the window, where Leo was still sitting on the swing, as motionless as a small, lonely statue. The morning sun illuminated the garden, making the imported flowers shine in vibrant shades of red and yellow. Everything looked perfect from a distance. A beautiful mansion, impeccable gardens, a fair-haired child sitting on an expensive swing. The picture of a wealthy and successful family. But William knew the truth. Behind the perfect facade there was only destruction, pain, and a completely lost father who had no idea how to fix his broken son. He had built skyscrapers that touched the clouds, but he couldn't build a bridge to the heart of a 3-year-old child. Perhaps a pregnant, rejected nanny was exactly the kind of unlikely solution this desperate house needed. Or perhaps she would just be the 16th on an endless list of failures. Either way, William would find out tomorrow. For now, he had a shattered Ming vase to clean up and a lonely son in the garden whom he didn't know how to reach. Emily Hayes woke before sunrise, as she had every day since finding herself alone and pregnant. The tiny room she rented in a boarding house in East London barely fit the single bed and a wobbly wardrobe, but it was all she could afford with her rapidly dwindling savings. 6 months of pregnancy meant 6 months without work, 6 months living on scraps and hopes that diminished with each passing week. She got up slowly, feeling the weight of her belly pull at her back. At 28, Emily had never imagined she would be in this situation. Pregnant, alone, without family, without reliable professional references, dependent on the charity of an employment agency that had placed her at the very bottom of the candidate list. The position was for a problematic family in Kensington, the kind of address Emily only knew from a distance when she passed by on the bus through the tree-lined streets, where each house was worth more than everything she would earn in 10 lifetimes of work. The landlady, Mrs. Davis, knocked on the door at 6 in the morning. "Emily, there's bread and coffee downstairs. Eat something before you go, dear. You need to eat properly." Emily smiled gratefully. Mrs. Davis was one of the few people who didn't judge her, who didn't ask awkward questions about the baby's father, or how a decent, hard-working young woman had ended up in this situation. Some kindnesses were small miracles in difficult times. After the simple but comforting breakfast, Emily put on the only outfit that still fit her body, transformed by pregnancy. A black elastic skirt and a white blouse that stretched over her prominent belly. It wasn't elegant or sophisticated, but it was clean and tidy. It was all she had. The journey to Kensington took 2 hours and 3 different buses. Emily watched out the window as the landscape gradually changed. The cramped houses and graffitied walls of East London gave way to the commercial buildings of the city centre, which in turn transformed into the secluded mansions and perfect gardens of West London. It was like crossing through different countries within the same city. When she finally got off the bus on the tree-lined avenue that led to the Blackwood mansion, Emily had to stop for a moment to catch her breath. Her feet ached inside her old shoes, and her belly felt as heavy as if she were carrying stones instead of a baby. But she couldn't give up now. She needed this job desperately. Her savings would barely last for another 2 weeks at the boarding house, and the baby was due in less than 3 months. The mansion's gate was immense, all wrought iron with golden details. Emily pressed the intercom with trembling hands. "Yes," a polite female voice answered. "Emily Hayes. I have an interview for the nanny position." There was a pause that seemed to last an eternity. Emily could almost feel the person on the other end evaluating her voice, her East London accent, deciding if she was worth opening the gate for. Finally, the gate buzzed open with a soft electronic hum. Emily walked up the cobblestone path that led to the main entrance, passing flower beds that looked like works of art and marble fountains that spouted crystal-clear water. It was a world completely different from anything she had ever known. The front door opened before she even touched the bell. A middle-aged woman, dressed in a discreet and elegant suit, examined her from head to toe with a neutral expression that revealed nothing. "I'm Sarah, Mr. Blackwood's secretary. Please follow me." Emily followed Sarah through an entrance hall that was larger than the entire boarding house where she lived. The marble floor shone so brightly she could see her distorted reflection, a woman in simple clothes with a large belly walking through a palace. Enormous. Paintings decorated the walls, and a crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling, casting small rainbows when the sunlight hit it. Sarah led her to a room that appeared to be an office. Mahogany bookshelves covered 3 walls, filled with hardcover books and business trophies. A huge desk dominated the center of the room, and behind it, looking out the window with his hands in his pockets, stood a tall man with broad shoulders and a rigid posture. William Blackwood turned as they entered, and Emily felt the weight of his gaze. He was exactly the kind of man she expected to find in a mansion like this. A perfectly tailored suit, dark hair combed back, an expression that wavered between exhaustion and suspicion. But it was his eyes that surprised her. Dark eyes that seemed to carry an invisible weight, a sadness he tried to hide behind the facade of a successful businessman. His gaze immediately dropped to her belly. Emily saw his expression change, saw the hesitation and judgment flash across his face. She knew that look. She had seen the same expression on dozens of faces in recent months. The pregnant nanny, the single woman expecting a child. She didn't need words to know what he was thinking. "Miss Hayes," William said, his voice polite but cold, "please, have a seat." Emily sat in the leather chair that probably cost more than 6 months of her old salary. She kept her back straight, her hands folded over her belly, trying to appear more confident than she actually felt. William moved back behind the desk, but didn't sit. He remained standing, looking at a file Sarah had left there. Probably the miserable resume the agency had put together for her. 3 jobs in 5 years, no written. References, a high school education, and nothing more. "I see here that you've worked in 3 homes," William began, his voice maintaining that professional and distant tone. "But there are no references from any of them. Can you explain why?" Emily took a deep breath. This was the moment she dreaded, the part where she would have to explain, where she would have to relive the humiliation and hope he wouldn't send her away immediately. "In the first house, I worked for 2 years looking after twins. The family moved abroad and I couldn't go with them because I didn't have a passport. They offered a letter of reference, but I lost it when I had to move suddenly from the house where I was living. And the second? I worked for a 1.5 years looking after a 5-year-old girl. The family was satisfied with my work, but when they let me go, they refused to give references." William raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Emily felt the heat rise in her neck, but she kept her gaze fixed on him. If she was going to be rejected, let it at least be for telling the truth. The wife believed. "There was something inappropriate between me and her husband." There wasn't. There never was. But she was jealous and fired me without notice. The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. William continued to look at her, his expression unreadable. "And the third job?" "It lasted 6 months," It was the last one. I was also fired for incompatibility. What kind of incompatibility? Emily hesitated. This was the hardest part. But lying wouldn't help. He would find out anyway. I got pregnant. The employer said a pregnant nanny didn't fit her family's profile. William finally sat down, leaning back, in his chair and lacing his fingers on the desk. He studied her in silence for a long moment that seemed to stretch into infinity. I see. And the child's father? Emily felt her nails dig into her palms. This was the question she hated answering the most. He's not in the picture. He won't be. Does he know about the pregnancy? He knows. He chose not to be involved. William nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he had already expected. Emily could see the rejection forming on his face. It was always like this. She was the nanny. Nobody wanted to hire, too poor, not formally educated enough. No reliable references, pregnant and single. A collection of red flags that would ward off any sensible employer. Ms. Hayes, I'll be frank with you, William said, his voice taking on a final tone. Your situation is complicated. I have no references to verify your previous work. You're 6 months pregnant, and you'll have a baby to care for soon. How can I trust that you will be able to adequately care for my son? Emily knew she should accept the rejection politely, thank him for the opportunity and leave. It was what a sensible person would do, but desperation left no room for sensibility, and there was something about this man, about that tired and lost look in his eyes, that made Emily want to fight a little harder. May I ask you a question? She said, surprising herself with her own boldness. William seemed equally surprised. You may. Why did you fire 15 nannies in less than a month? His expression immediately shut down. How do you know about that? Nannies talk to each other. Everyone in the business knows about the Blackwood house. They say the boy is impossible, that no professional can handle him, that he breaks things and hurts people. Emily leaned forward, ignoring the pain in her back. But I don't think he's impossible. I think he's grieving, and no one knows how to help him. William became very still. And you do? I know that children don't become problematic for no reason. I know your son was 3 when he lost his mother. I know that's devastating for such a small child. Emily placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. Children need love, attention, and patience. They need someone to truly see them, not just try to control or tame them. Your son doesn't need more discipline. He needs to heal. Silence fell over the office again. Outside, Emily could hear the distant sound of a lawnmower and birds singing in the perfectly manicured gardens. Inside the room there was only her and this powerful man who seemed to have everything except the answer to how to help his own son. William stood up and walked to the window again. From where she sat, Emily could see what he was looking at. In the garden below, a small boy was sitting alone on a swing. He wasn't swinging, not playing, just sitting there motionless like a small statue of loneliness. All the other 15 nannies came here with diplomas, certificates, decades of experience, William said, without taking his eyes off his son. They all promised they could handle Leo, that they had special techniques, proven methods. They all failed miserably. He turned to face her again. You have no diplomas, no references. You're pregnant and have apparently been fired from all your previous jobs for questionable reasons. Why should I believe you would be any different? Emily stood up too, ignoring the momentary dizziness. She looked directly into his eyes without fear or shame. Because I'm the only one not promising to tame your son. I just want to help him heal. And because, Mr. Blackwood, you're desperate. If you weren't, I wouldn't have even made it past the gate. It was too bold. Emily realized it the moment the words left her mouth. You don't speak like that to a billionaire in his own home, not when you're desperate for a job. But it was too late to take it back. To her surprise, William didn't seem offended. If anything, a small shadow of something that might have been respect passed over his face. You're right, he admitted. I am desperate. My son is lost, and I don't know how to reach him. Dozens of qualified professionals have failed. So maybe it's time to try something different. He returned to the desk and picked up a pen. The trial period is 2 weeks. The salary is double the market rate because, frankly, no one else wants this job. You'll have a room in the staff wing, 3 meals a day, and I will cover all your medical expenses related to the pregnancy while you're working here." Emily felt her legs go weak. He was offering her the job. He really was. "But," William continued, his voice hardening, "at the first sign that you can't handle Leo, or that your pregnancy is interfering with your work, the agreement ends immediately, understood?" "Understood," Emily whispered, barely able to believe it. "Good. You start tomorrow. Sarah will handle the paperwork and show you to your room." He extended his hand, and Emily shook it, feeling the firmness of his grip and the weight of what she had just accepted. This was her last chance. If she failed here, there would be no more opportunities. It would be her and the baby on the street, without money, without a roof over their heads, without hope. But as she looked out the window at the lonely boy on the swing, Emily felt something other than fear. She felt a strange, deep certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. That boy needed her as much as she needed this job, and Emily wasn't going to fail. She couldn't fail. It was all or nothing. And Emily Hayes chose all. Emily spent the night at the boarding house gathering her few belongings. There wasn't much to pack: a few changes of clothes, an extra pair of shoes, the faded photo of her parents she had kept since she was 18, and the only book she owned, a collection of fairy tales her mother used to read to her before everything fell apart. It all fit into an old fabric suitcase that had belonged to her grandmother. Mrs. Davis insisted on making her a special breakfast before she left. "You're going to need your strength, girl," the older woman said, serving warm homemade bread and coffee with milk. "Looking after a child isn't easy, especially one that nobody's been able to tame." "I'm not going to try to tame him," Emily replied, biting into the bread. "I'm going to try to understand him." Mrs. Davis shook her head with a sad smile. "You have too good a heart for this world, Emily. I just hope those rich folk don't take advantage of it." When Emily arrived at the mansion the next morning, Sarah greeted her at the door with the same neutral, professional expression as before. She led her through the luxurious hallways to the staff wing, an area separated from the main house by a discreet door. It was a different world back there. The floors weren't marble but simple ceramic tile. The walls had no expensive paintings, but just a clean white coat of paint. Still, to Emily, it was a palace compared to the tiny room at the boarding house. "This is your room," Sarah said, opening a door that revealed a small but comfortable space. A single bed with clean white sheets, a wardrobe, a desk, and a window that overlooked the back gardens. "The bathroom is shared with the other staff, but there are only 2 others living in the house at the moment, the cook and the housekeeper." Emily placed her suitcase on the bed, feeling a strange emotion tighten her throat. It was her room, hers, a place where she and the baby would be safe, at least for now. "Meals are served in the kitchen at 7 in the morning, noon, and 7 in the evening," Sarah continued, handing her a folder with papers. "Here is your employment contract, which you should read and sign. Your hours are from 8 in the morning to 6, in the evening, Monday to Friday. Alternate weekends off. Mr. Blackwood expects you to be available for emergencies at all times." "I understand," Emily said, flipping through the documents. The salary listed was 3 times more than she had earned at her last job. With that money, she could start saving for when the baby was born, maybe even rent her own place eventually. "Leo is in his room now," Sarah said, her voice lowering slightly. "Mr. Blackwood thought it would be best for you to meet him without him around. He'll be in his office if you need anything." Emily nodded, feeling her nerves start to kick in. This was it. The first encounter with the boy who had defeated 15 experienced nannies, the child everyone said was impossible. Sarah led her back to the main house and up a wide marble staircase to the 2nd floor. The hallway was long and silent, with several closed doors on either side. They stopped in front of a door at the end of the hall, and Emily could see crayon marks on the surrounding walls, childish drawings that someone had tried to clean but which still left colourful traces. "This is the door to Leo's room," Sarah said, her voice now almost a whisper. "He's in there. Alone. He locked himself in about an hour ago and refuses to come out." "He's locked in?" "No, not really. The door doesn't have a lock." But he pushes a chair against it when he wants to be alone. Sarah paused, her professional face finally showing a crack of genuine concern. The other nannies used to force their way in. He didn't like that. He would get violent. Emily nodded, understanding. Of course he got violent. People invading his only safe space, forcing him to do things when he clearly needed time alone to process his emotions. This boy wasn't being spoiled or naughty. He was protecting himself in the only way a 3-year-old knows how. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll take it from here." Sarah seemed hesitant to leave her alone, but finally nodded and walked back down the hall, her heels making a sharp sound on the marble floor. Emily stood in front of the door for a moment, taking a deep breath and placing a hand on her belly where the baby was surprisingly still, as if sensing the importance of the moment. She knocked softly on the door. No response. She knocked again, a little louder. "Leo, my name is Emily. May I come in?" Silence. Then a small, muffled voice. "No." It was the first word Emily had heard from him, and her heart ached with the sadness carried in that small absolute no. "Okay," Emily said, sitting down on the hallway floor, leaning her back against the wall next to the door. "I won't come in if you don't want me to. Can I just stay out here? I promise I won't force the door." Silence again. Emily waited, listening intently. She could hear muffled sounds from inside the room. Maybe he was moving, maybe just breathing. It was hard to tell. "Why do you want to stay out there?" came the small, suspicious voice finally. "Because I just got here, and I don't know anyone. I thought we could get to know each other a little before we actually see each other." "You're just another nanny." It wasn't a question, but an accusation. Emily could hear all the emotions behind those 4 words. Distrust, anger, weariness. How many nannies had this boy seen come and go? How many broken promises had he carried in his 3 years of life? "I am," Emily admitted, "but I'm different from the others. They all say that. Then they leave crying." Emily couldn't help a small smile despite the sadness of the situation. The boy was right. He had developed a perfect system for testing people and finding their weaknesses. It was a brutal but effective defense. "I'm not going to leave crying," Emily said firmly. "Do you want to know why?" "Why?" "Because I have a secret." Emily lowered her voice as if sharing something very important. "I'm scared and lonely, too, just like you." There was a long silence from the other side of the door. Emily waited, giving him time to process that. It was too true to be a strategy. She was appealing to the most basic connection between 2 human beings. Pure honesty. "You don't sound scared," Leo said finally. "Grown-ups don't get scared." "Yes, they do. They just don't show it. But I'll tell you an even bigger secret." Emily placed her hand on her belly again. "I'm going to have a baby in 3 months, and I don't know how I'm going to take care of her all by myself. That scares me a lot. Some nights I lie awake thinking about it, and I feel very small even though I'm a grown-up." "Where's the baby's daddy?" The question was so direct, so innocent in the way only children can be, that Emily felt her eyes sting. She blinked the tears back. "He's not here. He left before the baby was born." "Why?" "Because sometimes people are afraid of their responsibilities and they run away from them. He was like that." Another silence. Then so quiet Emily almost didn't hear it. "My mummy left too." Emily's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. So that was it. That was the root of it all. The boy thought his mother had chosen to leave, to abandon him just as Emily's baby's father had abandoned her. "Leo, can I tell you something very important? It's about your mum. I don't want to talk about her. I know it's hard, but I need you to know one thing. Your mum didn't leave because she wanted to. She didn't abandon you. She had an accident, and she couldn't come back anymore. But it wasn't your fault, and it wasn't her choice. She loved you very much. You didn't know her." Leo's voice came out louder, trembling. "You don't know anything." "You're right. I didn't know your mum. But I do know one thing. Mums who love their children never want to leave. Ever. And if she could be here with you right now, she would be, I'm sure of it." Emily heard a muffled sound that could have been a sob. Her instinct screamed at her to go in there, to hug that child, to comfort him, but she knew that forcing it would be a mistake. Leo needed to come to her of his own free will. "You know what I think?" Emily continued, keeping her voice soft. "I think you're very angry and very sad. I think you break things and scream because you don't know how to let all that sadness out any other way. And I think the people who came before me tried to make you stop, but nobody tried to understand why you were doing it. And you're going to understand. I'm going to try. But I need you to help me. I need you to tell me how you're feeling, even if it's scary. Can you do that?" The silence that followed was different from the previous ones. It wasn't distrust or anger. It was consideration. Leo was actually thinking about what she had said. Then Emily heard sounds of movement, small footsteps approaching the door, the scrape of a chair being moved, the doorknob turning slowly. The door opened just a crack, and through it, Emily saw for the first time the boy everyone said was impossible. Messy brown hair falling over blue eyes, swollen and red from crying. Wrinkled clothes stained with something that looked like paint. He was small, for his 3 years, thin in a way that suggested he wasn't eating properly, but it was his gaze that impacted Emily the most. Those eyes carried a sadness far too deep for such a small child. "You're pregnant," Leo said, pointing at Emily's belly. "I am, with a little girl. Is she going to be like me?" Emily understood what he was really asking. Is she going to be a problem like me? Is she going to make you leave crying? "She's going to be herself," Emily answered softly. "Just like you're yourself, every person is different, and that's a good thing." Leo looked at Emily for a long moment. Then, to her complete surprise, he opened the door a little wider. "Do you want to see my room? It's a mess. I broke a lot of things." "Yes, I'd like to see it." Emily stood up slowly, her back complaining. Leo held the door open as she entered, and what Emily saw made her swallow hard. The room was large and filled with expensive toys, but it looked like a battlefield. Torn books scattered on the floor, broken toys piled in corners, crayon marks on the walls, a cracked mirror. In the middle of all that destruction, there was a small area near the window where Leo apparently spent most of his time. A dirty blanket on the floor, a few stuffed animals huddled in a corner, and a framed photo of a beautiful, smiling blonde woman. "Is this your mum?" Emily asked, pointing to the photo. Leo nodded, his eyes filling with tears again. "She was pretty. She was very pretty. And you look like her." "I don't want to look like her," Leo suddenly shouted, kicking a broken truck. "She left me alone. Everybody leaves me." "Alone?" Emily knelt on the floor with difficulty, ignoring the discomfort in her belly. She got down to Leo's eye level but didn't try to touch him. "Leo, look at me. Look into my eyes." He looked, tears now streaming freely. "I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm going to stay here even when you scream, even when you break things, even when you're angry. I'm not going to leave. Can you believe that? Everybody says that. I know, but I'm different. Do you want to know how you can tell I'm different?" Leo nodded, sniffling. Emily took his small hand and placed it on her belly, where the baby was moving. Leo's eyes widened in surprise as he felt the movement. "Feel that? That's my baby moving. She's growing in here, and she'll be born in a few months. When she's born, I'm going to need a very special helper to help me take care of her, someone who understands what it's like to be small and scared. Do you think you could be that helper?" Leo kept his hand on Emily's belly, his eyes fixed on the spot where the baby was gently kicking. For the first time since his mother had left, something other than anger and sadness crossed his face. It was hope, small and fragile, but it was there. "Will she let me hold her?" "She will. And you'll be able to help give her a bath, choose her clothes, sing her to sleep. It will be very important for her to have a big brother who looks after her." "Brother?" Leo looked at Emily with wide eyes. "But she's not my real sister. Family isn't just about blood, Leo. Family is about who cares for you and who you care for in return. If you look after my baby as if she were your little sister, then she will be your little sister, in the way that matters." Leo thought about this for a moment. Then, slowly and hesitantly, like a frightened bird, he moved closer and hugged Emily, his small face pressed against the side of her belly where the baby was. "Don't leave," he whispered, and Emily wasn't sure if it was a question or a plea. "I won't," Emily promised, wrapping the boy in her arms and feeling the tears finally escape. "I won't leave, Leo, I promise." And in that destroyed room, amidst the shards of broken toys and scribbled walls, something began to heal. It wouldn't be quick and it wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. And sometimes, a start is all a person needs to find their way back home. William Blackwood couldn't believe it when Sarah entered his office 2 hours after Emily had gone up to meet Leo. He had been expecting to hear screams, crying, the sound of objects being broken. He had expected Emily to come down the stairs in tears like all the others, admitting defeat before lunch. But Sarah simply informed him that Emily and Leo were in his room talking quietly, and that the boy had asked the cook to prepare 2 cheese sandwiches for him and the new nanny. Leo never asked for food. He refused meals, threw plates on the floor, and screamed when anyone tried to make him eat. And now he was asking for sandwiches to share with a stranger he had just met. William went upstairs silently, driven by a curiosity he couldn't explain. The door to Leo's room was ajar, and through it he could see a scene that seemed impossible. His son was sitting on the floor with Emily, the two of them surrounded by the room's wreckage, eating sandwiches and talking softly. Leo was excitedly telling her something, gesturing with his hands, and Emily was laughing at something he had said. It was a genuine, warm laugh, the kind of sound that House hadn't heard in months. William didn't go in. He just stood there in the hallway, watching through the crack in the door, trying to understand what was happening. How had this pregnant woman with no formal qualifications managed in 2 hours what 15 experienced professionals had failed to do in weeks? What was her secret? He returned to his office unseen, but he couldn't concentrate on anything for the rest of the day. His mind kept returning to that image, Leo smiling, Leo eating, Leo looking for the first time in 6 months, like a normal child. The following days brought more surprises. Emily established a routine with Leo that was completely different from anything the other nannies had tried. She didn't impose strict schedules or rigid rules. Instead, she simply spent time with him, following his rhythm, letting him lead. When Leo wanted to stay in his room, she stayed with him. When he wanted to go to the garden, she accompanied him, sitting on the grass with difficulty because of her belly and watching as he finally started to play on the swings again. But the most remarkable thing was how she talked to him. Emily spoke to Leo as if he were a real person with valid feelings, not just a problem child who needed to be corrected. She listened when he spoke, even when his words didn't make much sense. She validated his emotions instead of trying to suppress them. On the 3rd day, William came down for dinner and found something he hadn't seen in a long time. Leo was sitting at the kitchen table with Emily, the two of them eating together. The boy had taken a bath, was wearing clean clothes, and had combed his hair. He was talking animatedly about a bird he had seen in the garden. "Hello, Daddy," Leo said when he saw William standing in the doorway, and there was something different in his voice. Not the usual tension, not the barely contained anger, just a simple greeting from a child to his father. William felt a strange tightness in his chest. "Hello, Leo. How was your day?" "It was good. Emily taught me how to make a bird's nest with twigs. Want to see?" It was the first time in months that Leo had voluntarily started a conversation with him. The first time he seemed genuinely interested in sharing something about his day. William nodded, not trusting his voice. Leo jumped from his chair and ran to get his creation, leaving William alone with Emily for a moment. She was eating slowly, one hand supporting her back, clearly tired. But when she looked at William, there was a glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. "He's a wonderful child," Emily said simply. "He just needed someone to listen." Before William could reply, Leo came running back with a tangle of twigs and leaves that vaguely resembled a nest. He held it up proudly for his father to see. "See?" Emily said birds make them like this for their families, to keep the babies safe and warm. William took the makeshift nest, feeling the weight of the twigs in his hands and the even greater weight of his son's words. Families, safety, protection. It was everything Leo wanted and needed, and William had failed miserably to provide it. "It's very beautiful, son," he managed to say, his voice huskier than usual. Leo smiled, that rare and precious smile William thought he had lost forever. Then the boy went back to his chair and continued eating, telling Emily about a drawing he wanted to make. That night, after Emily had put Leo to bed, William found her in the kitchen making tea. "How do you do it?" he asked bluntly. Emily turned, looking genuinely confused. "Do what? With Leo? How do you manage to reach him when no one else could?" Emily poured hot water over the tea bag, thinking about the question. When she finally answered, her voice was soft but firm. "I don't try to reach him, Mr. Blackwood. I just stay where he can find me when he's ready. And when he comes, I listen. Really listen, without judgment, without trying to fix it immediately. Sometimes people just need to be heard." "And what is he saying? What does he need?" Emily hesitated, biting her lower lip. "Can I be honest with you? Please." "Leo is carrying a terrible guilt. He thinks he's responsible for his mother's departure." William felt the blood run cold in his veins. "What? Why would he think that?" "Because no one ever properly explained to him what happened. 3-year-olds don't understand abstract concepts. They fill in the blanks with their own stories, and the stories children tell themselves are almost always bad. But I told him his mother had gone away, that she wasn't here anymore. Gone away implies choice, Mr. Blackwood. To a child, gone away means the person didn't want to stay anymore. Leo thinks his mother chose to leave because he did something wrong." William sat down heavily, in a chair, running his hands over his face. He had tried to protect Leo from the brutal truth, but in doing so, he had created a worse monster. His son had spent 6 months believing he was responsible for the loss of his mother. "What do I do?" he asked, and there was real desperation in his voice. "How do I fix this?" "You need to talk to him. Explain what really happened in a way he can understand. Don't avoid the word. Don't soften it too much. Children are more resilient than we think when they're given the truth. I don't know how to do that. I can help if you'd like. I can be there when you talk to him." William looked at this woman, this pregnant nanny without references, whom everyone had rejected, and felt something he hadn't expected to feel: deep and sincere gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply. The next afternoon, William, Emily, and Leo sat together in the boys' room. Emily had suggested a familiar environment where Leo would feel safe. William was nervous in a way he never was in multi-million-pound business meetings. "Leo," he began, his voice trembling, "I need to talk to you about your mummy." The boy immediately tensed, his eyes searching for Emily. She nodded encouragingly, holding his small hand. "It's okay," she said softly. "Your daddy wants to tell you the truth, and the truth is important, even when it hurts." William took a deep breath. "When your mum went away, I said she had gone on a trip. That wasn't true. I said that because I didn't know how to tell you what really happened. But I should have told you, and I'm going to tell you now." Leo looked at his father with wide, frightened eyes. "Your mum was in a very serious car accident. The doctors tried to help her, but they couldn't. She ended up going to heaven, to a place where people go when their bodies stop working." "Why did her body stop?" Leo asked in a small voice. "Because sometimes very bad accidents cause injuries that doctors can't heal. It wasn't anyone's fault. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't Mummy's fault. It wasn't the doctor's fault. It was just a very sad accident." "But I made her angry that day," Leo whispered, and the tears began to fall. "I didn't want to wear the clothes she picked. I shouted and made her sad, and then she left and never came back. So that was it. The specific guilt Leo carried. William felt his heart break, imagining his little son living with that weight for 6 months. "Leo, look at me," William said, kneeling on the floor and holding the boy's shoulders gently. "All children argue with their parents about clothes. I argued with my mother too when I was your age. That's normal. That didn't make your mum go away. The accident didn't happen because you shouted or got angry. It happened because another car hit hers. You had no control over that. You did not cause it. But if I had been good, maybe she wouldn't have left that day, Leo sobbed. She had to leave that day for a work meeting, William explained patiently. She would have gone even if you had been the best-behaved boy in the world. The accident would have happened anyway. It was not your fault. Emily moved closer too, sitting on the floor with difficulty and wrapping Leo in a hug. Your daddy is right, Leo. It wasn't your fault, and you know what else? Your mum loved you very much. If she could choose, she would have come back to you. She wanted to come back. But sometimes bad things happen, and they took that choice away from her. Does she still love me? From heaven? Always, William said, feeling his own tears threaten to fall for the first time in years. She will always love you, and she's not angry with you for that argument about clothes. She forgave you that same day because that's what mums do. Leo cried in Emily's arms for a long time, sobbing out all the emotions he had held in for months. William stayed there, one hand on his son's small shoulder, feeling completely inadequate, but trying to be present anyway. When the tears finally stopped, Leo looked at his father with red, swollen eyes. Can I visit her? In heaven? Not in the way we visit people here, William explained gently. But you can talk to her. You can tell her about your day, about the things you're feeling. She'll hear you from where she is. And will she answer? Maybe not with words you can hear, but I think she answers in other ways. When you see something beautiful and think of her, when you remember something nice you did together, when you feel loved, those are her ways of answering. Leo thought about it, processing with the seriousness only small children can muster. Then he nodded, accepting this new reality. Can I be alone for a little while now? He asked. I want to talk to Mummy. William and Emily left the room, closing the door softly behind them. In the hallway, William leaned against the wall, feeling emotionally exhausted in a way he had never experienced in his life. Thank you, he said to Emily, for everything, for helping him, for helping me too. Emily smiled tiredly. It's just the beginning. He'll still have hard days, moments of anger and sadness. Healing isn't linear, but at least now he knows the truth and can start to process his grief in a healthy way. You're amazing, you know that? Emily blushed, looking away. I'm just doing my job. No. You're doing so much more than that. You're saving my son, and I don't know how I'll ever be able to thank you for it. In that moment, with the afternoon light streaming through, the high windows and the soft silence of the house around them, William felt something shift inside him. Something he had kept frozen his whole life was beginning to thaw, and the woman standing beside him, with her prominent belly and her enormous heart, was the cause of that change. It was dangerous, this new and unknown feeling, but William was beginning to realize that maybe some dangerous things were worth the risk. 2 weeks passed since that conversation in Leo's room, and the transformation was so dramatic that even the household staff commented on it. The boy who had terrorized 15 nannies now woke up asking to see Emily, ate breakfast without complaining, and had even started helping to tidy up his own toys. The angry outbursts hadn't disappeared completely, but they were increasingly rare and less intense. William observed these changes with a mixture of relief and something more complex he couldn't name. He was spending more time at home now, making excuses to be present during the day. Meetings could be held via video conference, papers could be signed in the Home Office, and his vice president was perfectly capable of handling urgent matters. For the first time in his career, William was prioritizing his personal life over his business. His mother naturally noticed. Eleanor appeared at the mansion on a Thursday afternoon without warning, as was her custom. She swept through the front door with her Hermes bag and expensive perfume, already talking before she even saw anyone. "William? Where are you? I need to talk to you about the charity dinner on Saturday. Marcia Drummond will be there with her daughter, and I told her you—" She stopped mid-hallway when she saw the scene before her. On the large Persian rug in the living room, Leo was sitting with Emily, the two of them surrounded by colored pencils and paper. They were drawing together, and Leo was laughing at something Emily had drawn. It was a clear, joyful laugh, the sound of a genuinely happy child. Eleanor's face immediately hardened. William, who was coming down the stairs, saw her expression and felt his stomach clench. He knew that look. It was the look his mother had when she saw something she didn't approve of, something that threatened her carefully constructed control over the family. "Leo," Eleanor said, her voice sharp, "you shouldn't be playing on the living room floor like a beggar. And why is this woman allowing it?" Leo looked at his grandmother with a confused expression. "We're drawing, Grandma. Want to see? I drew a picture of a dog." "I'm not interested. Go to your room now." "Mother," William intervened, quickly descending the rest of the stairs, "there's no problem with them playing in the living room. That's what the house is for. The house is for being properly maintained, not for being treated like a playground," Eleanor retorted. Her gaze fell on Emily, who was trying to stand up with difficulty. "And you? You were not hired to sit on the floor scribbling. You were hired to look after the child properly." Emily got to her feet, keeping her back straight despite the visible discomfort. Her eyes met Eleanor's without fear. "Playing is part of the proper care of a child, Ma'am," she said calmly. "Leo is developing motor skills and expressing his emotions in a healthy way through art." Eleanor's face turned red. She was not used to being contradicted by employees. "How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who you're talking to?" "Mother, that's enough," William said firmly, placing himself between Eleanor and Emily. "Emily is doing an excellent job. Leo is better than he has been in months. Please, do not interfere." Eleanor looked from William to Emily, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "I see. So that's how it is. You're allowing this pregnant servant to have more authority in your home than your own mother." "I am allowing my son's nanny to do her job without being disrespected." "Nanny?" Eleanor spat, as if the word were an insult. "That's what she is, William, a nanny, an employee, don't forget that." Leo, who had been very quiet throughout the exchange, suddenly stood up and walked over to Emily, taking her hand. It was a small but powerful gesture of loyalty and protection. The 3-year-old boy was defending the person who had first defended him. "Emily isn't just a nanny," Leo said, his little voice firm. "She's my friend, and you're being mean to her, Grandma." The silence that followed was as tense as a thread about to snap. Eleanor looked at her grandson with a shocked expression, then at William, then back at Emily with something that looked dangerously like hatred. "We need to talk," she said to William. "Alone. Now." William glanced at Emily, who gave a discreet nod. She took Leo's hand and said softly, "Let's go continue drawing in your room, okay? We can use that new table." Leo hesitated, looking worriedly between his father and grandmother, but finally agreed. Emily led him upstairs, and William could see the stiffness in her back, the way she held her shoulders tense. She had been hit by that venom, even if she didn't show it. As soon as they were out of sight, Eleanor exploded. "Have you completely lost your mind? Are you allowing that unqualified woman, pregnant by who knows who, to manipulate you and your son? She's not manipulating anyone. She's taking care of Leo better than anyone has in months. She's playing you for a fool, William, don't you see? A young, poor woman, desperate for security, enters the home of a wealthy, widowed man. She wins over the son to get to the father. It's the oldest story in the book." William felt anger bubble up in his chest. "You know nothing about her." "I know everything I need to know. I had her investigated." William froze. "You did what?" "I had a private investigator find out who this Emily Hayes you've let into your house really is." Eleanor opened her handbag and pulled out a thick file. "And what he discovered is fascinating. Do you want to know?" "No. I'm going to tell you anyway because you need to know who you're dealing with." Eleanor opened the file with a cruel smile. "Emily Hayes, an orphan since 18, when her parents died in a fire in the council estate where they lived. Raised herself, bouncing from job to job. Was fired from her last but one job because her employer was jealous of her proximity to the husband. That doesn't mean anything inappropriate happened," William defended, but his voice sounded less firm. "Oh, but there's more. The father of her baby is a married man. She got involved with him knowing he was married, and when she got pregnant he discarded her like trash. She even tried to blackmail him, threatening to tell his wife. I don't believe that. It's all here, William. Reports, dates, evidence. She is exactly the type of opportunistic woman you should avoid. And now she's in your house, manipulating your vulnerable son to get to you and your fortune. William felt doubt begin to creep into his mind. He didn't want to believe it, but his mother had never lied to him before. She was manipulative and controlling, but not a liar. What if Emily had really omitted important parts of her past? You need to fire her immediately, Eleanor pressed, before she does any more damage, before Leo gets even more attached, before you make a mistake that will ruin your reputation and his. I need to think. There's nothing to think about. She deceived you, William, used you. Use your brain instead of whatever else you're using. William felt his face flush with a mixture of anger and shame. Get out of my house. William, get out. Now. I will handle this my own way. Eleanor gathered her things with sharp movements, but before leaving, she turned at the door with a final warning. When you realize I was right, don't say I didn't warn you. And when she's pregnant with your child too, trapping you forever, remember this day. She left, slamming the door, leaving William alone in the hall with the investigator's file in his hands. He looked at it as if it were a venomous snake. Part of him wanted to throw it in the bin without reading it, but another part, the part that had built an empire through caution and due diligence, knew he needed to know the truth. William slowly climbed the stairs to the second floor. He could hear voices coming from Leo's room. Emily was reading a story, her soft, melodious voice bringing the characters to life. Leo was laughing at all the right moments. William stopped at the door, watching through the crack. Emily was sitting in the chair next to Leo's bed, the book open in her lap, one hand supporting her back. She looked exhausted, and William realized he should probably insist she rest more. The pregnancy was advancing, and he saw her massaging her aching back more and more frequently. As if sensing his gaze, Emily turned her head and their eyes met. There was something in that look, a vulnerability and honesty that made William's heart ache. She smiled gently, a smile that asked for nothing, that just offered warmth and understanding. William backed away from the hallway and returned to his office, closing the door behind him. He sat in his chair and opened the file, forcing himself to read every word. The investigator had been thorough. Photos, interviews, public records. It was all there. And everything his mother had said was true. Emily came from extreme poverty. Her parents had perished in a fire. She had been fired from her penultimate job under suspicious circumstances. And the father of her baby was indeed a married man who had abandoned her when he found out about the pregnancy. But as he read the details, William also saw something his mother had conveniently omitted. The full story. Emily hadn't known the man was married when she got involved with him. She found out only when she became pregnant, and he rejected her brutally. The threat to tell his wife wasn't blackmail. It was just a desperate Emily saying that maybe the wife should know what kind of man she had married. She never followed through with it, and regarding the previous job, the truth was even sadder. The employer's husband had indeed shown an inappropriate interest in Emily. She had rejected him repeatedly, but the wife, instead of blaming her husband, blamed Emily and fired her. It was unfair and cruel, but unfortunately common. Emily wasn't an opportunist or a manipulator. She was just a woman who had suffered more than her fair share of injustice and bad luck. A woman who, despite everything, had kept her heart open and her kindness intact. William closed the file and threw it in his desk drawer. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the gardens where Leo and Emily were now playing. The boy was running ahead, pointing at something he had seen, and Emily was following more slowly, smiling with that infinite patience that seemed to be her defining characteristic. In that moment, William made a decision. He was not going to fire Emily. He was not going to let the poisonous seeds his mother had planted grow into doubt and suspicion. He was going to trust. He was going to choose to believe what he saw with his own eyes, not what paid investigators discovered in people's pasts. But there was something else, something William was beginning to recognize that scared him more than any investigation report. He was falling in love with Emily, with this pregnant, rejected nanny that everyone said was unsuitable. He was falling in love with the way she treated his son, with the genuine kindness in her heart, with the strength she showed despite all the adversity she had faced. It was madness. It was exactly the kind of complication he should avoid. But William Blackwood, who had spent his entire life making only safe and sensible choices, was discovering that the heart didn't care for sensibility, and that was going to change everything. The following weeks brought a subtle but noticeable change in the household dynamic. William began to have dinner with Leo and Emily regularly, something he had never done before. He came home earlier, joined in the games in the garden, and was slowly building the bridge that had been missing between him and his son. And in all these moments, Emily was present, facilitating the interactions with her warm, non-judgmental presence. Leo flourished with the attention from both of them. Tantrums were now rare exceptions, not the rule. He slept better, ate better, and had even started making friends with other children at the park, where Emily took him in the afternoons. It was as if an invisible weight had been lifted from his small shoulders, allowing him to finally just be a child. But Leo's transformation did not go unnoticed by Eleanor, who saw every improvement as a growing threat. She began to appear at the mansion with increased frequency, always bringing with her women from London's high society and their single daughters. "William, dear," she would say on a Saturday afternoon, as an elegant woman in a Chanel dress and her blonde daughter had tea in the drawing room. "This is Patricia Drummond and her daughter Caroline. Caroline just returned from an MBA at Harvard and is looking to invest in startups in Britain." William would shake hands politely, make superficial conversation, and make it clear, without being rude, that he wasn't interested. But Eleanor persisted, week after week, bringing a new candidate with each visit. Lawyers, doctors, businesswomen, all impeccably educated and from influential families, all carefully selected to be everything Emily was not. Emily observed these visits with a neutral expression, always discreetly withdrawing when the guests arrived. But William noticed the way her shoulders tensed, how she avoided meeting his gaze after the visits left. She was building walls around herself, preparing for the inevitable rejection that her life experience had taught her to expect. One evening, after a particularly painful visit where Eleanor had brought a wealthy widow with 2 adult children, William found Emily alone in the kitchen. It was almost 10 at night, and she was preparing warm milk, one of the things that helped with her pregnancy-induced insomnia. "You should be resting," William said, leaning against the doorframe. Emily gave a small jump of surprise, almost dropping the mug. "Mr. Blackwood, sorry, I didn't hear you come in." "William," he corrected for the 10th time. "You can call me William when we're not in public." Emily nodded but didn't repeat the name. She continued stirring the milk, keeping her eyes fixed on the mug. "About earlier today," William began, not quite sure how to broach the subject. "My mother is being insistent. She's worried about you and Leo. It's understandable." "She's being meddlesome and manipulative," William corrected more honestly, "and I want you to know that I'm not interested in any of the women she brings here." Emily finally looked at him, and there was something vulnerable in her eyes. "You don't need to explain your personal choices to me, Mr. Blackwood. I'm just the nanny." "You are not just anything, Emily." William entered the kitchen, closing the distance between them. "You saved my son. You're saving this entire family, and I—" He hesitated, the words stuck in his throat. "You what?" William looked at this woman, with her prominent 8-month belly, her tired but still beautiful face, her eyes that carried so much pain, but could still offer so much love. And he knew he had to be honest, no matter how scary it was. "I care about you, more than I should, more than is appropriate for an employer." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the refrigerator. Emily placed the mug on the counter with trembling hands. "Mr. Blackwood." "William." "William," she repeated, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You can't say these things. You can't feel these things." "Why not?" "Because I am exactly what your mother said. A servant pregnant with another man's child, with no education, no family, nothing to offer. You're a billionaire who can have any woman in Britain. Doctors, lawyers, businesswomen. Women suitable for your social status. I don't want women suitable for my social status, William said, taking another step towards her. I want someone who sees beyond the money and appearances, someone with a genuine heart, someone like you. Emily shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. You're confusing gratitude with something else. I'm helping Leo, and you're grateful. That's all it is. It's not just that, and you know it. Even if it wasn't, Emily said, her voice growing firmer, I can't return these feelings. It wouldn't be fair to you, to Leo, to anyone. In 3 weeks my baby will be born. I'll have a daughter to raise on my own. I can't add more complications to my life. And what if I wanted to help? What if I wanted to be there, not just for Leo, but for you and your daughter too? Why? Emily practically shouted, her voice breaking. Why would you want to take responsibility for another man's daughter? For the daughter of a man who used me and discarded me? What kind of sense does that make? The same kind of sense as you taking care of a traumatized boy who made 15 nannies run away. It doesn't have to make sense to be real. Emily wiped away impatient tears with the back of her hand. Your mother will hate me even more. She already sees me as a threat. If she knows you have feelings for me, she'll do everything in her power to destroy me. She can't destroy you. I won't let her. You underestimate the power people like her have, Emily said with a bitter laugh. I come from a world where rich people always win, always get what they want. Your mother can take this job from me with one phone call. She can make sure I never work in London again. She can make my life a living hell. William knew she was right. His mother had connections all over the city, influence in circles Emily couldn't even imagine. If Eleanor truly decided to destroy Emily, she could do it with little effort. So what do you suggest we do? William asked, feeling frustrated and helpless. Ignore what we feel. Pretend it doesn't exist. You need to focus on what's best for Leo, Emily said firmly. He needs stability, not more drama and complication. He's only just started to heal. We can't disrupt that now. Leo loves you. He would be happy if what? If I became a permanent part of the family? William, I'm leaving when my daughter is born. I'll need a few weeks to recover, and then I'll look for another job where I can bring her with me. That has always been the reality. You knew that when you hired me. William felt his stomach drop. He had conveniently ignored that fact, had allowed himself to imagine a future where Emily stayed, where she became a permanent part of their lives. But she was right. She had a daughter coming, a life of her own to build. He had no right to assume she would choose to stay. What if I asked you to stay? He said softly. What if I offered you a permanent position, not just as Leo's nanny, but as someone important in this family's life? Emily looked at him for a long moment, and William could see the desire and fear warring on her face. Ask me that again after my daughter is born, she said finally, when you've had time to think clearly, without the emotion of the moment. If you still feel the same after seeing the reality of me as a single mother. With a newborn baby, then we'll talk. But not now, please. William wanted to argue, to insist, but he saw the exhaustion on her face and knew it wasn't the time. She was entering the final stage of her pregnancy, carrying the physical and emotional weight of raising a child alone. He had no right to add more pressure. All right, he agreed, but Emily, I'm not going to change my mind, and I'll be here, regardless of your decision. Emily nodded silently, picked up her mug of milk and left the kitchen, leaving William alone with his turbulent thoughts. In the following days, a strange tension settled over the house. William and Emily were carefully polite to each other, but avoided being alone. Leo, with the keen perception of children, noticed something was different, but couldn't identify what. Eleanor, on the other hand, knew exactly what was happening. She had spies in the house, staff who reported every look, every word, every shared moment between William and Emily, and what she heard infuriated her beyond reason. She scheduled a lunch with William at one of London's most exclusive restaurants, where conversations could be had in discreet corners away from unwanted ears. You're falling in love with her, Eleanor accused as soon as the starters were served and the waiters had retreated. Don't deny it. I can see it on your face. William didn't deny it. He was past the point of lying to himself or anyone else. What if I am? Then you're being a fool who will destroy his reputation and Leo's for a romantic fantasy with an unsuitable servant. She is not unsuitable. She is one of the most genuine and kind-hearted people I have ever met. She is poor, uneducated, and pregnant with another man's child, Eleanor listed coldly. Those are 3 enormous red flags that you are choosing to ignore because she's good at looking after children. She's more than that. Is she? Then tell me, William, what do you really know about her? About who she really is when she's not performing the role of the perfect nanny? Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You investigated her past. You know she got involved with a married man. You know she was fired from multiple jobs. How do you know she isn't just playing a part to win your trust, and eventually your fortune? Because I know her. I see how she treats Leo when she thinks no one is looking. I see the genuine goodness in her. Or you see what she wants you to see. Think, William. A desperate woman, with no options, enters the home of a widowed billionaire. She wins over the son first because she knows that's the path to the father's heart. It's classic manipulation. She's not like that. Are you sure? Absolutely sure. Because if you're wrong, you're not the only one who will suffer. So will Leo. He's already attached to her. When she shows her true colors, when the relationship inevitably falls apart, Leo will pay the price. Are you going to do that to your son? After everything he's already been through? Eleanor's words hit their mark. William loved Leo more than anything. The thought of causing the boy more pain was unbearable. What if his mother was right? What if he was being manipulated by a well-executed performance? I see your thinking, Eleanor said with satisfaction. That's good. Use your head, not your heart. Fire the nanny before it's too late. Give her a generous severance package and recommendations for another job in another city, far away from you and Leo. I can't do that. Leo needs her. Leo will get over it. Children are resilient. He adapted to 15 nannies leaving. He'll adapt to a 16th. But if you continue down this path, if you allow her to entrench herself even further in your lives, the damage will be permanent. William stared at the plate of expensive food in front of him, feeling nauseous. His mother was planting seeds of doubt he didn't want to cultivate, but which were hard to ignore completely. He thought of Emily, of her face when she said she couldn't return his feelings. What if that wasn't just caution, but guilt? What if she really was manipulating the situation? No, he didn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. Emily was genuine. He knew she was. But doubt, once planted, was hard to completely eradicate. I'll think about what you've said, William said finally, just to end the conversation. Eleanor smiled, satisfied. She had planted the seeds. Now it was just a matter of waiting for them to grow and poison everything from the inside out. And as William drove home that afternoon, torn, between his head and his heart, between what he felt and what his mother said he should do, Emily was in her room feeling the first contractions. The baby was coming, and nothing would ever be the same. The pain started gently, almost imperceptibly, like a mild cramp in her back. Emily was organizing Leo's clothes when she felt the first real contraction, a wave that washed over her belly and made her double over. She looked at the clock on the bedroom wall. 3 in the afternoon. The baby wasn't due for another 3 weeks. The second contraction came, 15 minutes later, stronger than the first. Emily took a deep breath, trying not to panic. She had read about premature labor, knew it could happen, but she hadn't expected it to happen like this, alone in a house where she was just an employee. Leo was in the living room watching a cartoon, and Emily went down the stairs, gripping the handrail tightly. Each step seemed harder than the last. She found Sarah in the hall, reviewing some paperwork. "Sarah," Emily called, her voice coming out weaker than she intended. I think the baby's coming." Sarah dropped the papers immediately, her eyes widening with concern. "Now? But you still have 3 weeks to go." "I know. But the contractions have started and they're getting stronger." "Where's Mr. Blackwood?" "In the city, I think. He had meetings all day." Sarah picked up the phone and dialed quickly. Emily heard snippets of the conversation, Sarah explaining the situation with growing urgency. When she hung up, she put an arm around Emily's shoulders. "He's on his way. We'll get you to the hospital immediately. Do you have a bag packed? Emily nodded. She had packed a small bag weeks ago, following advice she'd read in a donated magazine at the boarding house. It was stored under her bed, with changes of clothes for the baby, a few basic items, and the only photo she had of her parents. William appeared, running, less than 5 minutes later, his hair disheveled and his tie loosened. He had clearly dropped everything and rushed over. When he saw Emily leaning against the wall, holding her belly as another contraction ripped through her, something in his face changed. "Let's go," he said, grabbing the car keys. "The hospital is 15 minutes from here." "What about Leo?" Emily asked through gritted teeth. "Sarah will look after him. You need to go now." William guided her to the car with a firm but gentle hand on her back. He opened the passenger door and helped her in, then ran to the driver's side. As he drove through the London streets with frightening efficiency, he kept glancing at Emily, concern etched on every line of his face. "Is it very bad?" he asked when they stopped at a red light. "It's getting worse," Emily admitted. "The contractions are coming faster now, every 10 minutes, I think," William pressed the accelerator as soon as the light turned green. "Hang in there, we're almost there." Emily closed her eyes and tried to focus on her breathing, as she had read she should. But fear was starting to take over. The baby was coming too early. What if something went wrong? What if the baby wasn't ready? What if she didn't survive childbirth alone, without family, without anyone to hold her hand? As if he could read her thoughts, William reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're not alone, I'm here, I'll stay with you." "You don't have to, If you say you're just the nanny, I'm going to be very angry," William interrupted, his voice firm but laden with emotion. "You're important to me, to us, and I'm going to stay by your side through this, no matter what happens." Emily felt tears well up, mixing with the sweat of her pain. She squeezed his hand back, holding on as if it were an anchor in a storm. The hospital was private and expensive, the kind of place Emily had never imagined setting foot in. William led her straight to the obstetric emergency unit, where nurses immediately put her in a wheelchair. Everything happened very quickly after that. Questions about her medical history, papers to sign, a medical team running tests, and confirming that yes, she was in active labor. "You're 4 centimeters dilated," the obstetrician explained, a middle-aged woman with a kind face. "The baby is coming and there's no stopping the labor now. We'll monitor everything closely, but things seem to be progressing well." "But it's too early," Emily said, her voice breaking. "She needs 3 more weeks." 37 weeks is considered early term, but not high-risk premature, the doctor reassured her. "Many babies are born at this gestational age and are perfectly fine. We'll take very good care of you both." They moved her to a delivery room, and William remained by her side throughout the entire process. He held her hand through every contraction, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and whispered words of encouragement when the pain became unbearable. He didn't leave even when the doctors suggested he might want to wait outside during the most intense part. It was almost 11 at night when the contractions reached their peak. Emily was exhausted, every muscle in her body screaming in pain. She wasn't sure how much more she could take. "You're doing so well," William said repeatedly. "So strong, so brave." "I don't feel strong," Emily cried between contractions. "I'm terrified." "It's normal to be scared. But you can do this. I know you can." When it was finally time to push, Emily felt as if her body was being torn in two. She gripped William's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white, screaming with an intensity that came from somewhere deep and primal. And then at 11:32 at night, a sharp, strong cry filled the room. The doctor held up a tiny, crying, covered human being, her lungs clearly working perfectly, despite being 3 weeks early. "It's a beautiful, healthy girl," the doctor announced, smiling. "And listen to those lungs." They placed the baby on Emily's chest, and she looked at that red, scrunched-up face, those tiny eyes opening for the first time, those little fingers instinctively grasping her daughter, her baby, the miracle she had carried for almost 9 months, alone and scared, but who was now here, real and perfect. "Hello, my love," Emily whispered, tears falling freely. "I'm your mummy, and I love you so much." She looked up and saw William standing beside the bed, gazing at the baby with an expression of pure awe. There were tears in his eyes too, and when he met Emily's gaze, something passed between them. A deep, inexplicable connection, forged in fire and pain and miracle. "She's perfect," William said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Completely perfect." "Do you want to hold her?" Emily offered impulsively. William hesitated, as if unsure he had permission, but then he held out his arms and Emily carefully transferred the bundled baby to him. She watched as William held her daughter, with a surprising gentleness for such a large man, looking down at her with an expression of reverence. "Hello, little one," William murmured. "Welcome to the world. You are so loved already." In that moment, something settled in Emily's heart. A certainty she had tried to deny for weeks. William wasn't just fulfilling an obligation or being kind. He truly cared. For her, for the baby, for the possibility of a family that didn't follow traditional rules, but was real nonetheless. The next few days in the hospital were a blur of exhaustion, joy, and adjustment. Emily learned to breastfeed, to change nappies, to interpret her daughter's different cries. And through it all, William was there. He visited every day, sometimes twice a day, bringing flowers, decent food to replace the hospital meals, and always asking how Emily was feeling. On the third day, when it was finally time to choose a name for the baby, Emily looked at the girl sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside her bed. "Still haven't decided?" asked William, who was sitting in the visitor's chair flipping through a business magazine. "I was thinking of Sophia," Emily said softly. "It was my mother's name." "Sophia is beautiful. Sophia Emily Hayes." Emily tested the name, letting it roll off her tongue. It sounded good. It sounded right. But as she filled out the birth registration forms, Emily felt a weight on her chest. Sophia Emily Hayes. No father listed. No family besides herself. A child who would start life with the same obstacles Emily had faced. Poor, without resources, dependent on the kindness of strangers. William returned on the fourth day to take them home. Emily had assumed she would be dropped off at the boarding house, but when they arrived at the mansion instead, she looked at William confused. "You can't go back to that boarding house with a newborn baby," he said before she could ask. "Your room here is ready. Sarah has arranged for a cot and all the supplies you'll need." "William, I can't." "Yes, you can. Leo is waiting to meet his little sister, and you need time to recover before you think about anything else." Emily wanted to argue, but she was too exhausted. And the truth was, she had nowhere else to go. The boarding house didn't allow babies. She had no money to rent her own place, and the idea of being alone with a newborn without help or support was terrifying. Leo was waiting at the door when they arrived, practically bouncing with excitement. "Is she here? Is my little sister here?" "She's here," Emily said, adjusting the bundled baby in her arms. "Do you want to meet Sophia?" Leo approached with wide eyes, looking at the tiny face with reverence. "She's so small." "You were just like that when you were born," William said, crouching beside his son. "Small and perfect." "Can I touch her?" "You can, but very gently. She's very delicate still." Leo reached out a finger and gently touched the baby's tiny hand. Sophia grasped his finger instinctively, and the smile that lit up Leo's face was brighter than the sun. "She grabbed me. Daddy, she grabbed me. See? She already likes you." Emily watched the scene, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. There was her traumatized son whom she had helped to heal, now all gentleness and love with a baby who wasn't even biologically related to him. And there was William, the man everyone said was too cold to feel deeply, now kneeling on the floor sharing his son's joy. This wasn't a traditional family. It wasn't what fairy tale books depicted, but it was real, and maybe, just maybe, it could be theirs. That night, when Sophia finally fell asleep in the new cot in her room, Emily allowed herself to cry. She cried with relief that her daughter was healthy. She cried with exhaustion from the birth and everything that led up to it. But mostly, she cried with hope. For the first time in a long time, Emily allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, things could work out, that she wouldn't have to do it all alone, that there were people who cared, and as her tears soaked the pillow, Emily whispered a silent prayer. Not for everything to be perfect, because nothing ever was, but for it to be real, for it to be lasting, for her to have, finally, found a place to call home. The first few weeks with Sophia were simultaneously the hardest and most rewarding of Emily's life. The baby woke every 3 hours to feed, leaving Emily in a constant state of sleep deprivation. Her breasts ached, her back complained, and there were moments when she felt so exhausted she could barely remember her own name. But then Sophia would open those dark eyes and look up at her with that absolute trust only babies have, and Emily knew she would do it all again without hesitation. What surprised her was how much help she received. Sarah appeared regularly with hot meals and offers to hold the baby while Emily took a shower. The other household staff, whom Emily had feared would judge her, were surprisingly supportive and kind. But it was William who truly left her speechless. He would appear in Emily's room in the early hours of the morning when he heard Sophia crying. The first few times, Emily tried to send him away, insisting she could handle it alone, but William would simply take the baby after she finished feeding, place her over his shoulder, and pace the room with that rocking motion fathers instinctively know, humming softly until Sophia burped and fell back asleep. "You don't have to do this," Emily would say every time. "You have work in the morning. You need to sleep." "And you don't?" William would always reply. "You're recovering from childbirth. You need rest just as much as I do. But she's not your responsibility." William would stop pacing and look at Emily with an intensity that made her feel as if he could see right into her soul. "What if I want her to be?" Emily never knew how to answer that, so she would change the subject, thank him, and watch as William gently placed Sophia back in her cot, his movements as careful as if he were handling crystal. Leo also became an enthusiastic helper, albeit in his own 4-year-old ways. He insisted on choosing Sophia's outfits every morning, always picking the most colorful and extravagant ones. He would sing to her when she cried, nonsensical songs he made up on the spot, but that somehow always managed to calm the baby. And he would proudly show her off to any visitor, declaring that this was his little sister and that he was responsible for looking after her. One afternoon, 3 weeks after Sophia's birth, Emily was breastfeeding in the armchair in her room when she heard insistent knocking at the front door. Loud voices, the unmistakable voice of Eleanor cutting through the air like a knife. Emily quickly placed Sophia in her cot and went downstairs, finding a tense scene in the entrance hall. Eleanor was there with 2 other high society women, all dressed in designer clothes and carrying handbags that cost more than a year of Emily's old salary. "Where is my son?" Eleanor was demanding of a visibly uncomfortable Sarah. "I need to speak with him immediately." "Mr. Blackwood is in his office on an important video conference," Sarah was explaining. "He asked not to be disturbed." "I don't care about video conferences. This is a family emergency." It was then that Eleanor saw Emily standing halfway down the stairs, her face contorted into something between disdain and triumph. "Ah, the nanny. I see you're still here. I thought you would have been gone by now that you've had your child." Emily descended the rest of the steps slowly, holding her head high. "Mr. Blackwood kindly offered for me to stay while I recover from the birth." "How kind of him," Eleanor said, her tone making it clear she thought it was anything but kind. "And your baby? Where is the child?" "Sleeping in my room." "How convenient. A crying newborn in a house where my grandson is trying to recover from trauma. Surely that can't be good for his development." One of Eleanor's friends, a thin woman with platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, leaned in and whispered something to Eleanor that Emily couldn't hear, but which made all 3 women laugh in a way that was not at all funny. "Mrs. Blackwood," Emily said, keeping her voice steady despite the trembling she felt inside. "With all due respect, Leo is very happy to have a little sister. He loves her and takes care of her. It has been good for him, not harmful." "Little sister," Eleanor repeated, savoring the word as if it were poison. "How presumptuous! That child is no sister of Leo's. She is the daughter of a married man who used you and discarded you. She is a living reminder of your shame, not family to my grandson." Emily felt the words like a physical slap. She knew people like Eleanor thought this way, but to hear it said aloud with such cruelty still hurt. Before she could respond, the office door opened and William emerged, his expression as dark as a storm. "Mother, what are you doing here?" "I've come to save you from yourself," Eleanor declared dramatically. "And it's about time. This situation has gotten completely out of control. A nanny living here with a bastard child. You acting as if you're some kind of substitute father. It's a scandal, William. A complete scandal." "Lower your voice," William said, his voice dangerously low, "and never ever use that word to describe Sophia again." "Sophia?" Eleanor scoffed. "You even know her name. This is even worse than I thought." "Emily, tell him. Tell my son that you're just using him, that you're manipulating the situation to secure financial security for you and your daughter." All eyes turned to Emily. She could feel the weight of expectation, the judgment, the thinly veiled cruelty. Part of her wanted to scream, to defend herself, to list all the ways she had helped this family. But another part, the part that had been broken so many times by rich and powerful people, just wanted to disappear. "I have never tried to use anyone," Emily said quietly. "I'm just trying to raise my daughter the best way I can." "Raise her at my son's expense," Eleanor spat. "Enough!" William's voice thundered through the hall, making everyone jump. "Get out of my house now." Eleanor stared at her son with wide, shocked eyes. "William, I said get out. You have disrespected Emily, you have disrespected Sophia, and you have disrespected me by invading my home and making a scene. You are not welcome here until you can behave with a minimum of decency. You're choosing this woman over your own mother. I am choosing kindness over cruelty, love over judgment. And yes, if that means choosing Emily and Sophia over you, then that's what I'm doing." The silence that followed was absolute. Eleanor's friends stared at their shoes, clearly uncomfortable. Sarah had discreetly vanished, and Emily was frozen in place, barely able to believe what she was witnessing. Eleanor gathered her handbag and her wounded pride, her face red with humiliation and anger. "You will regret this," she promised. "When this woman shows her true colors and destroys you and Leo, remember that I warned you." She marched out, her friends scurrying after her. The door closed behind them with a final thud, and then there was only silence. William ran a hand over his face, looking suddenly exhausted. "I'm sorry. You shouldn't have been subjected to that. You don't need to apologize. She's your mother. That doesn't give her the right to be cruel." William walked over to where Emily was standing, stopping at a respectful distance but close enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "Everything she said was wrong. You are not using anyone. And Sophia is not that horrible word she used. Sophia is a beautiful, innocent child who deserves to be loved, not judged." Emily felt tears threaten, but she held them back. "Thank you for defending me, but maybe your mother is right about one thing. Maybe it's better if I leave before I cause any more trouble between you." "No." The word came out firm and final. "You are not going anywhere. Not before you're ready. Not because my mother says so, and frankly, Emily, I hope you never leave." Before Emily could process that or reply, a sharp cry sounded from upstairs. Sophia had woken up and was hungry. "I'll get her," Emily said quickly, starting up the stairs. "Emily," William called, making her stop. "Think about what I said. Please." She nodded without looking back and hurried up, her heart beating so fast she was sure he could hear it. William had essentially chosen her over his own mother. He had defended Sophia as if she were his own daughter. And now he was asking, in an unspoken but clear way, for Emily to stay not just as an employee, but as something more. That night, after Sophia was fed and asleep, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The baby breathed softly in the cot beside her, completely oblivious to the complications of the adult world around her. She was so small, so innocent, so dependent on Emily for everything. Emily thought about her own childhood, growing up poor but loved while her parents were alive. She thought about the difficult years after they were gone, bouncing from job to job, always being discarded, always being judged. She thought about the man who had used her and abandoned her when she needed him most. And then she thought about William, about how he held Sophia with such gentleness, how he appeared in the early hours just to help, how he had stayed by her side during childbirth, holding her hand through the pain, how he had defended her and her daughter against his own mother. William wasn't perfect. He had his own scars, his own complicated history, but he was good, genuinely good, and he was offering something Emily had never dared to dream of: a family, a home, a future that wasn't defined by struggle and survival. The question was, did Emily have the courage to accept it, to risk her heart one more time, to believe that this time could be different? She looked at Sophia sleeping peacefully, at that perfect little face that trusted her completely. Emily had to be brave not just for herself but for her daughter. She had to give Sophia the chance of a better life, even if it meant risking everything. The next morning, when William appeared for breakfast with Leo, Emily made a decision. She was going to stay. Not forever, not yet. But she would stay long enough to see if what was growing between her and William was real, if it was strong enough to withstand the judgments of the outside world, the interference from Eleanor, and the complications of blending their broken lives into something that could be whole. It was a huge risk, but maybe, just maybe, it was a risk worth taking. 2 months had passed since the confrontation in the hall, and Eleanor had not returned to the mansion. But her absence didn't mean surrender. She had changed tactics, using more subtle but equally venomous weapons. William began receiving calls from members of his company's board, questioning his emotional stability. Old clients would casually mention hearing worrying rumors about his personal life, and articles began to appear in gossip columns, speculating about the billionaire businessman and his mysterious nanny. Emily saw the weight of it on William's shoulders. He tried to hide it, kept a brave face, but she knew the signs. The nights he stayed up late in his office, the crease of worry between his eyebrows, the way he constantly checked his phone as if expecting the next attack. One morning, while Emily was preparing a bottle for Sophia and Leo was eating cereal at the kitchen table, Sarah entered with a grave expression. "Mrs. Hayes, there are reporters at the gate." Emily almost dropped the bottle. "Reporters? Why?" "Apparently, someone leaked information about you and Mr. Blackwood. They want photos and comments." William appeared at the kitchen door before Emily could answer, already dressed for work, but with a furious expression. "I've already called security. They'll handle it. No one is getting onto the property." "Was that your mother?" Emily asked, though she already knew the answer. "Probably. She has contacts at every major publication in London." William poured himself a coffee with sharp movements. "She's trying to force my hand, create enough public pressure that I'll be forced to act." "Maybe she's right," Emily said quietly. "Maybe I should leave." "No." William put his cup down so hard that coffee splashed out. "Sorry, but no. You are not going to let her drive you out of here." Leo, who had been quiet during the entire exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Is Emily going away?" The panic in his little voice was like a knife to Emily's heart. She quickly knelt beside him, ignoring the sleeping Sophia in a portable bassinet on the floor. "No, my love, I'm not going away." "Promise." Emily looked at William, who nodded encouragingly. "I promise. I'm not going anywhere." But keeping that promise was becoming increasingly difficult. The reporters camped at the gate weren't the only problem. Emily started getting strange looks when she took Leo to the park. Other mothers would whisper when she walked by. Once, a woman approached her and asked point blank if it was true that she was having an affair with her employer while pregnant with another man's child. Emily had fled the park in tears that day, holding Leo's hand as he asked why the lady had been mean. How did she explain to a 4-year-old the cruelties adults were capable of inflicting? William was increasingly present at home, cancelling meetings and delegating responsibilities. He seemed determined to create a protective bubble around Emily, Leo, and Sophia. But Emily knew that bubbles eventually burst. One afternoon, when Sophia was almost 3 months old, Emily went downstairs to get some water and found William in the garden, staring into space. He didn't hear her approach, and she stopped for a moment, just watching him. Even with all the stress, Even with the worry lines, he was handsome. But it wasn't his looks that drew Emily in. It was the inherent goodness he showed in every interaction, the patience with Leo, the gentleness with Sophia, the respect he always showed her. "You'll wear out the garden just by looking at it," Emily said softly. William turned, surprised, and then smiled. That rare smile that transformed his entire face. "I was just thinking." About? About how much everything has changed in the last few months. About how my life is unrecognizable compared to what it was before you arrived. Emily sat on the nearby garden bench, and William joined her. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the birds and the wind in the trees. "William," Emily began, using his first name more easily now, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "I always am." "Ah, you regretting it, defending me against your mother, keeping me here despite all the pressure. Because if you are, I understand. I can leave, and that would make all of this stop." William turned to face her completely, taking her hands in his. "Look at me, Emily, really look." She did, meeting his dark, intense eyes. "I don't regret a single thing. Not for a second. The only thing I regret is not finding you sooner. Not being able to protect you from everything you went through before you got here." "William, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "I spent my entire life doing what was expected. I married Catherine because our families thought it was appropriate, not because I loved her. I built an empire because it's what a man in my position was supposed to do. I followed all the rules of society, did all the right things. And you know what that got me? An empty life, a loveless marriage, a son I barely knew before you showed up." Emily felt tears begin to form. "You can't blame your whole life on not knowing me." "I'm not blaming. I'm acknowledging a truth. You woke me up, Emily. You woke Leo up. You brought life back into this dead house, and I'm not giving that up. I'm not giving you up, no matter how many reporters my mother sends or how many gossip columns she feeds." "But your reputation—" "That's all it is, reputation, appearances, superficial things that don't matter in the end. What matters is what we have here, in this house." Leo laughing again. Sophia growing up surrounded by love. You, finally safe and valued. That's real. Everything else is just noise. Emily wanted to believe it. With every fiber of her being, she wanted to believe that love could truly conquer all, that they could build a life together despite all the obstacles. But years of disappointment had taught her caution. "What if it's not enough?" she whispered. "What if the pressure keeps building until something breaks? Then we fix it together, because that's what families do. They face problems together." "Family," Emily repeated, testing the word. "Is that what we are? That's what I want us to be, officially, permanently." William squeezed her hands. "Marry me, Emily." The world seemed to stop. Emily was sure she had misheard. "What?" "Marry me, not because you need security, or because I'm trying to solve a problem, but because I love you. Because I love how you care for Leo, how you raise Sophia with such dedication, how you keep your heart open despite everything you've been through. Because I want to wake up every day for the rest of my life knowing that you're here, that we're a real family. William, this is crazy. We've barely known each other for 6 months. People will say you're making a terrible mistake. Let them talk. I know the truth, and so do you And so, you're honest with yourself." Emily closed her eyes, feeling tears stream down her face. "I can't give you what other women could. I don't have a formal education. I don't have social connections. I can't help you close deals or impress clients. I don't need any of that. I need someone who makes me want to be a better person. I need someone who sees my son not as a problem to be solved, but as a child to be loved. I need you, Emily. Only you." "And Sophia?" Emily asked, her voice breaking. "Do you really want to take responsibility for her? For a child that isn't even yours? I want to legally adopt her, give her my surname, raise her as my daughter because, in the only ways that matter, she already is." Emily opened her eyes and saw absolute truth in William's face. no hesitation, no doubt. Just certainty and love so deep it was impossible to question. Your mother will disinherit you. Your friends will turn their backs on you. You'll lose everything. I'll gain everything that truly matters. William knelt on the grass in front of her, still holding her hands. So, will you give me the honor of becoming my wife? Emily looked at this man, this billionaire businessman who had been cold and distant, but whom she had watched transform into something entirely different. She thought of Leo, who called her his second mum and loved Sophia like a sister. She thought of Sophia growing up with a father who chose her even without biological obligation. She thought of herself, finally having the chance to belong to something greater than her own daily struggle. And then she thought of the most important lesson she had learned in the last few months. Sometimes courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing the scary thing anyway because it's worth it. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. William stood up and pulled her into a hug, and for the first time since they had met, he kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and laden with promises of a future they would build together, stone by stone. When they parted, Emily was laughing and crying at the same time. You know your mother will try to stop this with all her might. Let her try. Nothing can change my mind now. But as they walked back to the house hand in hand, neither of them had any idea how hard the battles to come would be, because Eleanor Blackwood was not one to accept defeat easily, and she still had cards to play, cards that could threaten everything Emily and William were trying to build. The war was just beginning, but at least now they were fighting it together. The news of the engagement spread like wildfire through London's high society. William had announced it publicly at a press conference, telling the world he was engaged to the mother of his soon-to-be adopted son, and that he didn't care about anyone's opinion. It was bold, it was defiant, and it was exactly the kind of gesture that made Eleanor completely lose her composure. She appeared at the mansion 3 days later, this time accompanied not just by friends, but by a lawyer. Emily was in Sophia's room when she heard the commotion downstairs, loud voices, accusations being shouted. She picked Sophia up from her cot and went down carefully, her heart pounding. The scene in the living room was chaotic. Eleanor was standing in the middle of the room, her face red with rage, while William tried to remain calm. The lawyer, a thin man in a grey suit, held a thick folder of documents. "You can't do this," Eleanor was shouting. "I will not allow you to destroy our family name by marrying this opportunist." "Mother, we've already discussed this. My decision is made. Then I will take legal action." Eleanor turned to the lawyer. "Show him." The lawyer opened the folder and took out several documents. "Mr. Blackwood, your mother has consulted me about the possibility of contesting your mental capacity to make decisions. She has concerns about your emotional stability. Since the loss of your wife." William was petrified. "You're trying to have me declared incompetent?" "I'm trying to save you from yourself," Eleanor practically screamed. "You are clearly not thinking straight. No sane man would marry a servant pregnant with another man's child, let alone adopt her bastard." "Get out of my house," William said, his voice dangerously low. "I will not leave until you see reason, or until this lawyer begins proceedings to have your competency evaluated." Eleanor pointed at Emily, who was still on the stairs holding Sophia. "She's bewitched you somehow. She used your son, your loneliness, your vulnerability, but I will prove it in court if necessary." Emily descended the rest of the steps, her anger overcoming her fear. "Have you no shame? Your own son has found happiness for the first time in years, and all you can do is try to destroy it." "Do not speak to me," Eleanor spat. "You are nothing. A poor, uneducated girl who got lucky being hired by a desperate family. You took advantage of that opportunity in the most sordid way possible." "That's not true, isn't it?" "Then tell me, Emily, when exactly did you plan this? Was it when you first saw the mansion? When you realized how much my son was worth? Or was it gradual, a careful manipulation through the child?" "I never manipulated anyone. I only tried to help Leo." "Help?" Eleanor scoffed. "What a convenient word. You helped so much that you're now engaged to a billionaire. What a coincidence." William stepped between them. "That's enough. Mother, you have a choice. You either accept my decision and remain a part of our lives, or you continue with these ridiculous accusations and lose me and Leo forever. You can't make me choose between accepting this farce and losing my son. You are making yourself choose. I offered you the easy path. Accept Emily, accept Sophia, be part of our family, but you chose war instead. The lawyer stepped forward, extending papers to William. Mr. Blackwood, these are petitions for a court-ordered psychological evaluation. Your mother is prepared to proceed if you do not reconsider. William took the papers, glanced at them briefly, and then tore them in half. Good luck proving I'm insane, but if you want to try, go ahead. You'll find I have much better lawyers than this one. Eleanor stared at the torn papers on the floor, her expression cycling through multiple emotions. Shock, anger, and finally, something that could have been despair. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice breaking for the first time. "Why are you choosing her over me?" William took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice was softer but no less firm. "I'm not choosing her over you. I'm choosing love over control, happiness over appearances, a real life over a performed one. And if you can't understand that, then I'm sorry, but that's your problem, not mine." "You'll regret this," Eleanor said, but there was less conviction in her voice now. "When she leaves you, when she takes what she can and disappears, you'll remember this day." It was then that Leo appeared at the top of the stairs. No one had noticed him there, but it was obvious from the expression on his small face that he had heard everything. "Grandma, why are you being mean to Emily?" His voice came out small but clear. Eleanor looked at her grandson, and something in her face changed. "Leo, darling, you don't understand. I'm trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" "Emily helped me when I was sad. She makes me happy. Sophia makes me happy. Why don't you want me to be happy?" The simplicity of the question cut through all the adult complications, all the social politics and wounded pride. In the end, it was just that. A child asking why his grandmother didn't want him to be happy. Eleanor looked at Leo, then at William, then at Emily, holding Sophia. Emily could see the battle raging on the older woman's face. Pride versus love, control versus acceptance. "I do want you to be happy," Eleanor said finally, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know how to handle this, losing my control over the family, seeing my son choose a path I didn't plan." "You're not losing anything," William said gently, "unless you choose to walk away. There is room for you in our life, Mother, but it has to be on our terms. No cruelty, no manipulation, no attempts to destroy Emily. And if I can't accept it, what if this is too much for me? Then that's your right. But it will cost you your relationship with me and with Leo, and eventually with Sophia too, because she will grow up knowing her grandmother rejected her before she even met her." Emily saw the moment Eleanor truly understood what was at stake. Not money or social reputation, but real relationships. True love. The chance to be part of something genuine instead of just keeping up appearances. The lawyer, realizing the situation was slipping from his control, intervened. "Mrs. Blackwood, we can still proceed with the petitions. I have other legal avenues we can explore." "No," Eleanor said abruptly. "Thank you for your time, but your services are no longer required." The lawyer looked shocked, but gathered his papers and left quickly. After the door closed behind him, Eleanor sat down heavily on the sofa, looking suddenly much older than her 62 years. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "How to accept something so different from what I always imagined for you." Emily handed Sophia to William and, surprisingly, sat down next to Eleanor on the sofa. The older woman looked at her in surprise. "Mrs. Blackwood," Emily began, "I understand that I am everything you didn't want for your son. I'm poor without a formal education, with a daughter from another man, but I promise you I will love William with everything I have. I will care for Leo as if he were my own son, and I will raise Sophia to be a kind and respectful person." "Why are you being kind to me?" Eleanor asked. "After everything I've done?" "Because I understand fear. I've lived with fear most of my life. Fear of not having enough, fear of losing everything, fear of never being good enough. Your fear is different from mine, but it's still fear." And I know fear makes people do terrible things. Eleanor looked at Emily for a long moment, really looked at her for the first time. Not as a threat or an intruder, but as a person, a woman who had fought against impossible odds and still kept kindness in her heart. "You named the baby after me," Eleanor said abruptly. Emily blinked, confused. "I'm sorry?" "Sophia, it's my first name too. Eleanor Sophia. I never used Sophia. I always hated how old-fashioned it sounded, but it was my grandmother's name." She looked at the baby in William's arms. "Did you name her after me?" I didn't know," Emily admitted. "I chose Sophia for my mother's name, but if it's your name too, maybe it's a sign." "A sign," Eleanor repeated, and for the first time something like a smile touched her lips. "Maybe it is." Leo came down the stairs and ran to his grandmother, throwing his arms around her. "You're not angry anymore, Grandma?" Eleanor hugged her grandson, and Emily saw tears in the older woman's eyes. "No, my dear, I'm not angry anymore. I was confused and scared, but not anymore." "So, you'll let Emily marry Daddy? And you'll like Sophia?" Eleanor looked at William, who was holding Sophia, with that mix of pride and protectiveness new fathers have. She looked at Emily, who had offered forgiveness when she had every right to hold a grudge, and she looked at Leo, who was gazing up at her with that pure hope only children can maintain. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I will let them, and I will try. I don't promise it will be easy or that I'll change overnight, but I will try." It wasn't a complete reconciliation. It wasn't total forgiveness or immediate acceptance, but it was a beginning, and sometimes a beginning is all a family needs to find its way back to one another. That night, after Eleanor had left with hesitant promises to visit again, William and Emily stood in the garden under the stars. Sophia was asleep in her bassinet beside them, and Leo was safe in his bed upstairs. "Do you think she'll really try?" Emily asked. "I think so. My mother is many things, but when she gives her word, she usually keeps it. And if she can't, what if it's too hard for her?" William pulled Emily closer. "Then we will have tried. We will have offered her the chance. We can't control her choices, only our own, and I choose you, always." Emily nestled into his arms, feeling safer than she ever had in her life. "When are we getting married?" "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, if you'd like." Emily laughed. "Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Somewhere small and intimate. Just us and the people who really matter." "The garden," William suggested. "Let's get married here, where you and Leo first connected, where Sophia will grow up, where we'll build our life together." "Perfect," Emily whispered. "Absolutely perfect." And for the first time since it all began, Emily truly believed it could work. That love could actually conquer the odds. That a rejected nanny and a closed-hearted businessman could really build something beautiful and lasting. The road to get there had been hard, and there would still be challenges ahead, but they would face them together as a family. And that, Emily finally understood, was the most important thing of all. The 3 months that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. William began the legal process to adopt Sophia, a decision he made public despite his lawyer's advice to keep it private. He wanted the world to know that Sophia was his daughter in every way that mattered, blood or not. The paperwork was extensive, the background checks were invasive, but William navigated it all with steadfast determination. Emily watched it all with a mixture of awe and gratitude. She had spent so long convinced she would have to do everything alone that seeing someone voluntarily take responsibility for her daughter was surreal. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night, check on Sophia sleeping peacefully in her cot, and have to remind herself that this wasn't a dream. It was real. Finally, it was real. Leo was ecstatic about the prospect of the wedding. He asked every day when Emily would officially become his second mum, when Sophia would officially become his sister. William had explained to him, in the simple language children understand, that love didn't need official papers to be real, but that the wedding and adoption would make it legal too. The biggest surprise came from Eleanor. 2 weeks after the confrontation, She appeared at the mansion with a large box wrapped in expensive gift paper. Emily was alone with the children when she arrived, and her first reaction was panic. But Eleanor seemed different, softer, less armed for battle. "May I come in?" she asked without her usual arrogance. Emily nodded, still cautious. Eleanor entered and looked around the living room, noticing Leo's scattered toys, Sophia's bassinet in the corner, the comfortable mess of a truly lived-in home. "This is for Sophia," Eleanor said, holding out the box. "And before you say you don't have to accept, please accept. It's important to me." Emily carefully opened the box and found inside the most beautiful christening gown she had ever seen. Delicate lace, hand-stitched embroidery, clearly expensive and chosen with care. "It was William's when he was christened," Eleanor explained. "My grandmother made it by hand. It's been passed down through the family for 3 generations. I want Sophia to wear it when you have her christened." Emily felt tears well up. "Mrs. Blackwood, I can't accept this. It's a family heirloom. And Sophia is going to be part of the family, officially, as soon as the adoption is finalized. Please, Emily, let me do this. Let me start to fix things." Emily accepted the gown with trembling hands. "Thank you. This means more than you can imagine." Eleanor sat on the sofa, her movements less rigid than usual. May I hold her? Sophia." It was the first time Eleanor had asked to hold the baby. Emily carefully picked Sophia up from the bassinet and placed her in her grandmother's arms. Eleanor gazed at the baby's face with an expression of wonder. "She has William's eyes," Eleanor said softly. "Not literally, of course, but she has that same watchful look, as if she's studying the world." "She studies everything," Emily agreed, sitting beside her. "She's very observant for someone so small. William was like that too, always watching, always thinking. I used to worry he thought too much." Eleanor looked at Emily. "I was a terrible mother to him, you know. I was always too busy with my own things. Parties, charity, appearances. I let nannies raise him, and now I see him with Leo and with Sophia, and I see the kind of father he's become in spite of me, not because of me." "You weren't terrible," Emily said gently. "You did the best you knew how at the time. That's generous of you to say, especially after how I treated you." Eleanor rocked Sophia gently. "I was so scared, you know. Scared of losing William, scared of being replaced, scared that you would leave and break his heart. So I tried to push him away from you first. It was cowardly and cruel." "It was human," Emily corrected. "We're all afraid of losing the people we love." Eleanor finally looked at Emily directly. "Do you really love him? Not for the money, not for the security, but for him." "I love him," Emily confirmed without hesitation. "For the man he is, for the kindness he hid for so long, for the way he loves Leo, for the way he chose Sophia even without obligation. I love him for all the right reasons. Then I was wrong about you, completely wrong, and I apologize, truly." It was the beginning of something fragile but real. Eleanor began to visit regularly, always bringing small gifts and offering genuine help. She would hold Sophia, play with Leo, and slowly begin to build the bridges she herself had burned. The wedding preparations were simple but meaningful. Emily didn't want anything extravagant, and William respected that. They hired a justice of the peace to perform the ceremony in the mansion's garden. Emily chose a simple but elegant dress from a small boutique, refusing William's offer to buy something lavish. It wasn't about the money. It was about the meaning. Leo was chosen as the ring-bearer, a role he took with absolute seriousness. He practiced walking in a straight line every day, holding an empty box, determined not to spoil the big day. 3 days before the wedding, Emily was in her room organizing her few belongings when Eleanor appeared at the door. "May I come in?" "Of course." Eleanor entered carrying an antique jewelry box. "There's a tradition in the Blackwood family. The bride always wears the family pearls on her wedding day. They're old, passed down through generations." She opened the box, revealing a stunning pearl necklace. "I wore them when I got married. William's grandmother wore them, her mother wore them, and I would like you to wear them too." Emily looked at the pearls, then at Eleanor. "Are you sure? After everything—" "I'm sure." You are going to be a Blackwood. That makes you family, and family wears the family pearls." Emily accepted the necklace with trembling hands, holding it against her chest. "I'll take care of them. I promise." "I know you will. And one day when Sophia grows up and gets married, she'll wear them too." It was that kind of acceptance, that kind of genuine inclusion, that made Emily know it had all been worth it. All the hardship, all the judgment, all the tears. That moment, with her future mother-in-law offering not just pearls but real acceptance, made everything meaningful. The night before the wedding, William found Emily in the garden where they had gotten engaged. Sophia was asleep in her arms and Leo was upstairs sleeping in his bed. "Nervous?" William asked, approaching her. "Terrified," Emily admitted with a smile. "But in a good way." "Me too. I never thought I'd get married again, especially not like this for real love." "No regrets?" "None. Except maybe not finding you sooner." William put his arm around her, careful not to wake Sophia. "You saved more than just Leo, you know. You saved me too. You taught me that feeling deeply isn't a weakness. That vulnerability isn't a flaw. That family isn't about blood or social status, but about love and choice." "You taught me that I deserve to be loved," Emily said softly. "That my past doesn't define my future. That taking risks sometimes brings the greatest rewards. Tomorrow," William said, "you will become my wife. Sophia will officially become my daughter. Leo will have the mother he's always needed, and I will have the family I never knew I wanted. How did we get so lucky?" "It wasn't luck," Emily said, looking at Sophia, then at the house where Leo slept, then at the man beside her. "It was choice, hard choices, scary choices, but choices we made together." "Together," William repeated, kissing the top of her head. "I like the sound of that." They stood there in the garden under the stars, a family about to become official. Tomorrow there would be vows and promises, but today, in that quiet moment, there was only peace. The peace of knowing they belonged to each other, that they had found their way home. And when Emily finally went to bed that night, Sophia sleeping beside her and her wedding dress hanging in the wardrobe, she whispered a prayer of gratitude. For all the hardships that had brought her here, for all the rejections that had led her to the right door, for all the painful moments, that made this happy moment even sweeter. Tomorrow she would be Emily Blackwood, wife, mother, part of something bigger than herself. And for the first time in her entire life, Emily Hayes felt like she truly belonged. The fairy tale wasn't about finding a prince. It was about finding a family. It was about love that chooses, not just happens. And as Emily closed her eyes and let sleep come, she knew her fairy tale was just beginning. The wedding day dawned with a perfect blue sky, without a single cloud in sight. Emily woke early, her heart pounding, but not with fear. It was pure anticipation. Today she would marry the man she loved, surrounded by the few people who truly mattered. Sarah and the other staff helped Emily get ready. The simple but elegant dress fell perfectly on her body, which was still recovering from pregnancy. The Blackwood family pearls shone at her neck, heavy with the weight of generations, but also with the promise of a future. Her hair was swept into a loose bun, with a few strands falling softly around her face. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Mr. Blackwood is a very lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Emily corrected, looking at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back. Not the physical woman, but the expression in her eyes. There was hope there, confidence, belonging, things that had been missing for so long. Sophia was in a bassinet nearby, dressed in the lace christening gown Eleanor had given her. The delicate fabric enveloped her like a hug, and Emily had to admit her baby had never looked more angelic. She picked her daughter up, careful not to crush either of their dresses. "Ready to meet your new daddy officially?" Emily whispered to Sophia, who looked up at her with those dark, watchful eyes. "He already loves you so much, and he'll love you forever, I promise." The ceremony was set for noon in the garden. The preparations had been simple but beautiful. White chairs arranged in a semicircle around a floral arch, white roses and lilies, nothing extravagant but perfuming the air with their sweet fragrance. There were only 15 guests in total, a few of William's close friends, Sarah and the other staff whom Emily had come to consider friends, and Eleanor. When the time came, Emily descended the stairs and crossed the house to the French doors that opened onto the garden. Through the glass, she could see the guests already seated. William was standing under the arch, wearing a light grey suit that made him look more approachable, less the intimidating businessman and more the man she had come to know. Leo stood beside him, holding the ring box with absolute seriousness, his little face focused on his important role. The music began, a simple guitar melody played by a local musician. The doors opened and Emily took the first step. Sophia was in her arms. She had decided to walk down the aisle this way carrying her daughter because they were both entering this family together. Everyone stood as she appeared, but Emily only had eyes for William. The expression on his face when he saw her took her breath away. It was pure, undisguised love. It was vulnerability and strength at the same time. It was promise. She walked slowly down the aisle of rose petals that Leo had insisted on scattering that morning. When she reached the arch, William extended his hand and she took it, feeling the firmness of his grip, the way their fingers intertwined as if they were made for it. The justice of the peace, an older man with a white beard and kind eyes, began the ceremony. His words were simple but profound, speaking of love that chooses, of families formed not just by blood but by commitment, of the courage to build something new on the ashes of the past. William Blackwood, do you take Emily Hayes to be your wife, to love and to cherish her, in good times and in bad, for as long as you both shall live? I do, William said, his voice firm and clear, with all my heart. Emily Hayes, do you take William Blackwood to be your husband, to love and to cherish him, in good times and in bad, for as long as you both shall live? Emily looked at the man before her, then at Leo looking up with a huge smile, then at Sophia in her arms. Her family. Finally, her family. I do, she said, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. With all my heart. Leo stepped forward, opening the ring box with reverent care. William took Emily's ring first, holding her left hand gently. With this ring I promise to love you every day for the rest of our lives. I promise to be a father to Sophia as if she were my own blood, because in the only ways that matter she is. I promise you will never be alone again. He slid the ring onto Emily's finger, and she felt the weight of the metal, the symbolism of the endless circle. Then it was her turn. She handed Sophia to Sarah for a moment and took William's ring. With this ring, I promise to love you with all the strength I have. I promise to be the best wife and mother I can be. I promise we will build a family together based on true love, not obligation or appearances. And I promise to never forget that you saved me when I needed it most. She placed the ring on his finger, and when their eyes met, there were tears in both. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the justice announced with a smile. You may kiss the bride. William pulled Emily into a kiss, and the guests applauded. But for Emily and William, the rest of the world disappeared in that moment. It was just them, sealing a commitment they had already made in their hearts long before this day. When they parted, Leo ran up and hugged them both, and Sarah returned Sophia to Emily's arms. The family posed together under the floral arch, and the photographer captured the moment. It wasn't a traditional family. It was better. It was chosen. It was real. The small reception was held in the garden, with simple but delicious food and warm conversation. Eleanor approached Emily when she was alone for a moment, Sophia asleep in her arms. You make my son happy, Eleanor said simply. I see that now, and I'm grateful for it. Thank you, Emily said, for being here, for giving us a chance. No, thank you, for forgiving me when I didn't deserve it, for including me when you had every right to exclude me. Eleanor gently touched Sophia's cheek. Can I be her grandmother too, for real, not just on paper? I would love that, Emily said sincerely. Every child deserves to have grandparents who love them. Eleanor nodded, discreetly wiping away a tear. Then I will try to be the grandmother I wasn't, for William. I will try to be better. That's all any of us can do, Emily said. Try, and when we fail, try again. 6 months passed in quiet happiness. Sophia's adoption was finalized, and she officially became Sophia Emily Blackwood. Leo began to call Emily Mum naturally without being forced, just because that's what she was to him now. And William settled into the role of a father with an ease that surprised everyone, including himself. Eleanor became a regular presence, showing up for family dinners and offering to watch the children when William and Emily needed time alone. She would never be perfect, occasionally slipping into old habits of control, but she always corrected herself, always apologized when she overstepped. One afternoon, almost 2 years after the wedding, the family was gathered in the garden. Sophia, now 2.5, was taking her first wobbly steps on the grass. Leo, at 6, was running around encouraging her, ready to catch her if she fell. Emily was sitting on a blanket with Eleanor, watching the children play. William was crouched near Sophia, his arms outstretched, ready to catch her. "Come on, Sophia," he encouraged. "You can do it. Come to Daddy." Sophia took 3 shaky steps, then 4, then 5. Then she stumbled, but instead of falling, she ran the last few steps and tumbled into William's arms. He caught her, laughing and spinning her in the air. "Daddy!" Sophia shrieked, her voice high and clear. "I did it! I walked to Daddy!" William held her against his chest, and Emily saw tears streaming freely down his face. The man who was once too cold to cry, the man who guarded his emotions behind walls of ice, was crying with pure joy because a child who did not carry his blood had called him Daddy. Emily stood up and walked over to them, wrapping them both in a hug. Leo joined them, and then Eleanor too, until the whole family was there, embracing in the garden where it had all begun. "I love you," William whispered to Emily, "for bringing all of this into my life, for teaching me that family is about so much more than blood." "I love you too," Emily replied, "for choosing us, for loving us when the rest of the world rejected us." In that moment, with the afternoon sun lighting up the garden and her imperfect but perfectly happy family around her, Emily finally understood the deepest truth. Sometimes the person that all of society rejects is exactly the one who can save you. True love transcends social classes, doesn't judge past mistakes, and builds bridges where others only see chasms. And the greatest miracle isn't finding someone perfect by the world's standards, but finding someone whose imperfect heart fits perfectly with yours, healing wounds you never even knew you had. Emily Hayes had started as a rejected nanny, pregnant and alone, without hope or a future. But she ended as Emily Blackwood, a beloved wife, a devoted mother, and part of a family that chose love over prejudice, kindness over judgment, and truth over appearances. It wasn't easy. It never is. But it was worth every tear, every fight, every moment of doubt. Because in the end, they had something money couldn't buy and social status couldn't guarantee. They had each other. And that was everything. End of story.